Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Unstoppable podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and I'm here today with my co host, Matthew Gould, co founder and CEO of Unstoppable Domains. And we're here today to talk all about what blockchain domains actually are. Hey, Matthew, how's it going?
Good, yeah. I figured we're about almost 10 episodes in now, so we should probably do an episode about blockchain domains.
It's about time. We probably should have started with this, but better late than never. So to kick us off, why don't you just tell us what is a blockchain domain?
Okay, well, before we dive into blockchain domains, I think it's a good idea to kind of backtrack and talk about regular domains. So everybody knows a regular domain on the internet. You type it into the address bar, and it looks up records for you that allow you to find the server that displays the website. So that's what's happening on the back end. And most people don't know this about regular domain names, but they tried to do a lot of really cool things with regular domain names when they first came out. They wanted to have like some sort of payments protocol. Everyone knows email. Email works based on your domain. There's a lot of records that happen on domain names that are useful for developers and sysadmins, etc. Right now, but they never really got regular domain names to be useful for end users. So that's kind of where blockchain domains come in, and so we've had like 30 years of regular domain names, and the underlying tech is just ready to have an update to expand the number of use cases. Traditional domain names, there's about 350 million registrations, and the vast majority of those registrations are if you have a small business or you have a large company and you're trying to sell products online. Most people don't think about domain names as digital identifiers or endpoints for themselves. Media brands accepted, like if you're like a politician or something, you may have a personal website that gets a bit of traffic. So I would say that's kind of a little bit of the backstory of regular domain names. And then, so what is a blockchain domain name? Well, blockchain domain names are domain name systems that are a suite of smart contracts. They're basically software. It's written on a public blockchain. That means that anyone can take a look at the records. And the big differentiating factors between blockchain domain names and traditional domain names is that blockchain domain names are held in the user's wallet. So unlike .com domain names, which are living on a server, and VeriSign is actually the owner of .com, there's no central server for blockchain domain names. They are on this public registry. And what's really nice about having it public is that it gives you a new security model. We actually think it's more secure, where each user holds the permissions to make updates to their domain name in their pocket. So you don't have to worry about the servers at VeriSign getting hacked or your domain name stolen, because you have it in your wallet now instead of their wallet. The other cool thing about that is it takes a system that is permissioned and makes it open so that you can build more applications on top of it. So those are the really big differences between traditional domain names and blockchain domain names. Is traditional ones are they are controlled inside these servers by VeriSign or by whoever the company is that owns that domain extension, and it's difficult for developers to get in there and really innovate on top of it because it's behind this walled garden, essentially. Where blockchain domain names are on public blockchains, and anyone can open up and read the smart contract code. And if you want to build applications or interesting things to work with blockchain domain names, you can actually look at the spec, design your own little program on top, and then kind of run like an app. So I think blockchain domain names are much more self-custody in a platform, as opposed to traditional domain names, which are kind of like designed with one set of features in mind.
Got it. So basically, if you want to have more control over your domain name, over your online identity, things like that, then blockchain domains is the way to go. Whereas with traditional domains, you sort of give control over all of those assets to a corporation.
Yes. And just to reiterate, the blockchain domains are much more open just by design, because anyone can inspect the records by looking them up themselves, or anyone could build additional software to interface with it. It's this permissionless innovation that's super interesting. And for people in the crypto space, you all know the DeFi space, the decentralized finance. And it's super interesting because all these different little projects who want to do financial applications on the blockchain can all talk to each other very easily. And this is a problem that we have with the traditional web, specifically with domain names, is there's not really a great way to plug traditional domain names into other types of software applications that may want to interact with them. Just as a really simple example, like wouldn't it be great if you had a domain name for a project that was actually controlled by a piece of software, like a smart contract, instead of being held by an individual? There's a lot of like open source projects, and who owns a domain name becomes an issue. And what if we could put it into something where multiple people could have access much more easily than having like a centralized account on like GoDaddy or something to make some updates? So just the programmatic aspect of blockchain domains is something that's very different from traditional domain names, and we're really at the beginning of seeing what kind of cool little programs you can write to run on top or alongside blockchain domains.
Got it. Got it. So I know there isn't a very long history of blockchain domains. This is still a relatively new thing, but let's just dive into the history, the short history a little bit. When was the first blockchain domain created? Who created it? Who are the competitors in this area? How has it evolved so far? Talk about all of these things.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency out there, and it just dealt with transferring around Bitcoin. So it was a financial application. And then one of the very next ones, I don't know if it was the second one, but I think it may have been, was actually Namecoin. So Namecoin was the first blockchain-based domain name system. It mines with Bitcoin, and they call it merge mining. But basically, it just means that if you're running a Bitcoin miner, you can also run a miner for Namecoin at the same time. I'm not going to go too deep into that. And they have a system for registering domains on Bitcoin. Now, that was like V0 for blockchain domain names. And there's a lot of limitations around building a naming system where you don't have a expressive programming language. And Namecoin does not have an expressive programming language because it's built essentially using Bitcoin's like technology stack. So that was the first time you saw blockchain names come out. And there were several other, there's been lots of attempts over the last decade since Namecoin to build a successful naming system. But I would say the next kind of point in time where there was a big step up was after smart contract blockchains came out. And Ethereum was the first one of those. And the reason why that was so interesting is because now you could have much more easily express complex relationships. And what do I mean by that? Now, I'm not talking about dating or anything. What I'm talking about is for blockchain domain names, like you want to point to your email server, or you want to point to you want to change what server your website is stored at, or you want to update a list of 30 or 40 different cryptocurrency addresses. Just that kind of flexibility to keep adding new categories to the spec, and then interact with other applications through like programmatic, like if this then that action is actually possible on a smart contract blockchain. And so I kind of break it into blockchain domain names where Namecoin was the very first, and that was right after Bitcoin, and then there's several other attempts in there from when Namecoin out to the launch of Ethereum. And then shortly after the launch of Ethereum, people started building naming services using smart contract blockchains. And we were actually pretty early working on this as well. And as soon as I saw that happen, that's when I got super interested. Because as a technologist, prior to smart contract blockchains, I didn't think you could build a fully expressive naming system. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the technology exists now and you could do it. And so there's been kind of like a huge push in this space over the last 5 years to build naming systems on smart contract blockchains. And so those are like the two eras of blockchain domain systems. And it's only been around for 10 years. And I think Unstoppable Domains has shown that this smart contract blockchain approach to building naming services can work. And now our next goal is to continue to scale it up and prove people that it can work on a global scale, because a lot of things in the blockchain space are still at like toy scale, but that's totally fine as long as we can keep moving it forward so that we can actually reach every user.
Yeah, and just one point of clarification for what you just said. Can you just go over for listeners listening who might not be familiar with smart contract blockchains are? Can you just briefly define that? We can probably do a whole episode just on smart contracts, but just briefly so people have an idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think most people know what Bitcoin is, and Bitcoin is super easy and very simple, and it was the first of its kind for allowing you to track digital assets in, and then be sure that someone's not making a copy of them. So you can feel good, like if you receive one Bitcoin, that you have the only one of that Bitcoin, and they're not making two of them and making photocopies. So that's basically what Bitcoin did. And that was the only problem it set out to solve. And it's a really hard problem, and they haven't really evolved beyond that. But that's a great thing to do for money and for store value. Now the problem with now obviously if the only thing you can do is track how many you have of something, you're going to be limited in the types of applications you could build. And so what happened was there's a lot of energy after the launch of Bitcoin thinking about, hey, how can we make this thing more general? So that we can apply all sorts of different types of programming logic to all sorts of we can apply any type of logic to these assets, and that's what smart contract blockchains did. So you had, and that was Ethereum was the first one of those. So you had Bitcoin come out, and it's like, hey, we can now track an asset, and the only asset we can track is Bitcoin, and that's it. We just track one asset, and then what happened was computer scientists spent a lot of time, Vitalik Buterin was one of them, thinking about how can we make this so we can track any asset and then perform logical operations on that. And that's what we ended up with Ethereum. So Ethereum is what's known as a Turing complete. It has like a Turing complete or close to for running programs. And that means that you can write almost any software program you want on Ethereum, and you can express that inside of code. And so that means, theoretically at least, that almost anything you want to do with any type of asset on the entire planet, you could write that into Ethereum. Now, there are limitations on that because of how much code you'd actually want to put on Ethereum. Like you don't want to put an HD video up there or something. But in general, you can do almost any action you want.
Okay, got it. So from a more practical standpoint, since blockchain domains right now can only run on the decentralized web, and that's not a mainstream thing yet, if somebody were to buy a blockchain domain right now, what practically can they actually do with it at the moment?
So the two things that we're seeing people do the most with blockchain domains, number one is set their cryptocurrency addresses and for sending and receiving cryptocurrency. And this is a pain point for crypto people anyway. Just copying and pasting those hex addresses is very difficult. And so that's a very straightforward use case. And that was actually the reason why we started the company, because we knew that, hey, it's really bad user experience to send crypto right now. And we could dramatically improve that by building a naming registry for cryptocurrency addresses. And if that's all the naming registry ever did, that would be enough, because it's painful. And we think that all 7 billion people on the planet are going to be sending cryptocurrency to each other. So if we can just solve that UX problem, that's enough. What happened is when we started digging into it, we're like, oh, we can make just like the Ethereum people said, we can make a much more generalized Bitcoin. When we started digging into name services, we said to ourselves at Unstoppable, like, we can make a much more generalized naming service. And so the second thing that we spent a little bit of effort on last year was allowing people to make decentralized websites. So now you can point your blockchain domain name to a website on one of these peer-to-peer hosting platforms like IPFS, for instance. So those are the two places where we are right now: decentralized websites, cryptocurrency payments. One of the things I said earlier that was neat about blockchain domain names is they are extensible. Like, they're very easy to continue to build more programs on because they're an open protocol. And so what we've been looking at is, what other cool things can we do with blockchain domains? And just like Ethereum was a generalized Bitcoin, our domain name service is a much more generalized domain service than what you currently have with DNS 1.0. And so we can actually add, sky's the limit, basically. So we did Twitter verifications, for instance, to hook this back to your social media account. I would say that people thought that was interesting. People are now connecting contact information back. So they have email that you can set up now. Chat, we had a chat protocol go out. And all of these features are just applications built on top of this blockchain domain protocol. And like, how many different apps can you build on top of blockchain domain protocol? I think you can build millions, just like you have at the App Store. And it's hard for me to imagine what all those are right now. And admittedly, they're difficult at this point in time to make work because blockchain is still a little bit slow and there's some problems. But from a pure technical perspective, given enough time, all of those little kinks will be worked out, and you could have a blockchain domain that really has superpowers. That's That's how I explain it. It's like these are blockchain domains are regular domains with superpowers that allow developers to come on and build more cool things on top of them.
Got it. So who are the people that are using these blockchain domains right now? Are they
Uh,
just developers?
So I would say the primary people right now are cryptocurrency users. We have a lot of techies, just people in tech in general who like to play with new technology, just like the early internet. We have people who have social media presence, right? And they want to secure their domain name to make sure that if they want to, make a pivot into talking more about crypto, they have a like a relevant domain name to match that. It's also like the same group of people who might want a traditional domain name. So anyone who's a professional, maybe you want to protect your small business, or you're thinking about launching a business in a couple of years, or you want to launch a social profile in a couple of years. So those are the people that we're seeing right now. It's like, does your grandma need a blockchain domain today? Probably not. But I do think, and I've said this before, it's a great way to start learning about decentralized technology, and the amount of usage for cryptocurrency and decentralized tech in the 2020s. I think this is the decade that people are really gonna start using it. And so if as a hobby or exploring or learning about this, I really think this is a good spot to come in and start to get educated.
Yeah, and I think for anybody who plans to be around in the next decade or two and is in some sort of professional role, I think it's a good idea probably just to go out and grab your name right now as a way to start, because your name is always going to be something that's part of you, and why not grab that, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and I also grab some of my like social handles as well. Like I, grab my Reddit username or something like that, and it doesn't have to, think about it like more broadly, just anything that you may want to have to interact with applications in the future. So, because we really think that blockchain domain names are going to be a good way for you to log into apps, and which you're starting to see already on some crypto applications. Most people out there haven't seen that yet, but that is something that we think is coming in the next few years.
Okay, so walk us through now. If somebody's listening to this, they're interested in getting a blockchain domain. Walk us through how to do that with Unstoppable.
Well, so we've made it super simple, and it's easy. You just go to our website. You can type in anything you want into our search bar, see if it's available, click around. We have some categories you can click through, maybe get some ideas. We're trying to make that better to give you some better suggestions. But we try to make it just as easy as buying a normal domain. And one of the big things to point out is like there's no renewal fees on our domain names. So when after you do check out, you do own that forever. So you're not going to pay us again next year or anything like that. And so that's probably like the biggest difference for consumers is that after you buy, you're like, wait, I don't have to pay renewal fees. So that part's different. But the rest of the checkout experience, we try to make as close to normal. And we have some guides on there about claiming your domain and how do you set it up. You do need to do some blockchain interaction. We're working on a mobile app here, which should be out for iOS this quarter. So that will make it a lot easier for you to manage to get that in order to interact with it. So, but these things do go into a crypto wallet. So that part is also, I guess, different for people when they're then dealing with normal domains. But yeah, you don't need anything special. Like you can just check out like you would at GoDaddy in order to get your domain name, and then dive into our user guides and read through those, and those will take you through the process of getting this into your wallet.
Yeah, so if you go to the main menu, there's a feature guide, and that's what I use to get set up. If you go through that feature guide, it literally outlines everything you need to know. And as a non-techie person, I was able to get everything set up. So just go to the feature guide, follow the steps, and you don't need to be a techie person. You don't have to have any background to be able to do it. One question I have for you, Matt, is when you go on the website to get a domain, you've got two options. You can get a .crypto or a .zil. Can you talk about the difference between the two and which one people might want to get?
Yeah, so they're functionally going to be the same on our back end, and we just built the .zil registry in cooperation with Zilliqa blockchain, and so that was our first one that we launched, and so that's the older one, and then .crypto was newer, and that's also on the Ethereum blockchain, and so that's just the backends are different between the two. They're built on two different blockchain systems, so it shouldn't matter too much to end users. It will change a little bit, which wallet you use to claim it. However, again, we're trying to merge all that with our new mobile wallet for unstoppable domains. So hopefully once that's out, they actually functionally will feel exactly the same to you.
Okay, and then I've also seen some other blockchain domains out there with different endings, like .eth. Can you talk about like the different endings? Talk about like where that comes from, maybe some of the competitors out there, and how Unstoppable is different from them?
Yeah, so I would just like so there's been a lot of blockchain domain systems over the past decade, and they've had different levels of adoption. And I would say that Unstoppable Domains has actually done pretty well. I think we've registered more domains than any other blockchain system ever. I have to double check that. We're close right around 500,000 as of today. So Unstoppable Domains is definitely the biggest. We're also in this for the long run, so we want to build this over the next 10 years. And this is really early technology. So I would just suggest you're picking a company where you feel comfortable that the people that are building out that blockchain domain system are committed to continuing to push out that code over the next several years and really get it into the ecosystem. Integrations are also important. There's not a lot of people out there that work across in any browser. Unstoppable Domains I think was actually the first blockchain system to be in a browser at all, and when we got into Opera natively last year. And same thing with like trying to get into the larger wallets. We just recently integrated with OKCoin. That's the first exchange I think that's integrated blockchain domain names. So I think we've got a good team to go out and do these reach outs. And of course I'm going to say that. And so I think Unstoppable Domains is making the best in class for blockchain domain names, and we're committed to continuing to make the best blockchain domain names for our users for the next decade. And like I said, I'm going to be here for a while. I'm not looking for anything else to do. This is the only thing I wake up and think about in the morning, and it's what I think about when I go to sleep.
I love it. So give me your predictions, Matt. Tell me how are blockchain domains going to evolve in 2021? How are they going to evolve in the next 5 years and the next 10 years?
So this next year is going to feel kind of like the last year or two, where they're just going to blockchain domains are going to continue to creep into more and more applications. And it's hard to project exactly when that tipping point is going to be inside the cryptocurrency ecosystem, where it's like, oh yeah, everyone has a blockchain domain name. So I don't think it's going to be 2021, but I do think like if you look out 5 years, I can say that everyone's going to be using a blockchain domain for sending and receiving payments, because we'll have worked out a lot of the technical problems with making them super easy to use and have all the features that people are looking for sending and receiving cryptocurrency well. So I think that 1 year more of the same, and continued slow march of increased adoption for blockchain domains across the cryptocurrency community. If we look out 5 years, I think everyone in crypto is going to be using these for every single crypto payment, or like 80% plus of them. And then if we go out 10 years, now you're talking about how are blockchain domains going to work with regular Web 2.0 apps for things like single sign-on, or for hosting really complex websites, exchanging data between users, chat, email, all those kind of apps. That's a little bit harder to predict because when you have new technology, it's like when they made the internet, no one could imagine Facebook, and so now they're making we have like the next version. When they started with all the cloud things, no one could imagine all these SaaS applications. It's probably probably a better look. Like around 2000, all of a sudden everything went to the cloud, and then now we have Salesforce and all these other giant SaaS companies. Everything's a SaaS, and so now we have this new technology that's going to take the web from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, and I do think it's a little hard to predict what we're going to be at in 10 years. I'm excited though. If I had to pick one, if you had to hold a gun to my head, I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting things around user consent for permissioning data as some form of ID or SSO, if I had to guess in 10 years. So you could use your blockchain domain name to check into your Airbnb, for instance, by assigning a key or something like that. So that's my wild prediction. And so don't hold me to that one, but you can hold me to the 1 year and 5 year. I feel pretty good about those.
Well, if it comes true, we can revisit this episode and you can go and brag about it on Twitter and all that good stuff.
There you go.
So when we think about the long term, then, are you envisioning a future where the internet, Web 2.0 as we know it today, is completely replaced by Web 3.0 and all the .coms are replaced by .cryptos and .zills? Or are we going to be in some sort of hybrid model moving forward where some applications are still on Web 2.0 and then some are on Web 3.0 and we all just coexist happily?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be like a hybrid migration type thing, just like we had with the original Web 1.0 when everything was an HTML website. Then we had like a bad time there where everything was Flash for a couple years, and then everyone eventually moved over to JavaScript and had these really interactive and complex applications that are fully in the cloud. So that was a pretty big migration. But every website you look at now, I mean, yes, there's still some HTML websites up there with flashing banners or whatever. But again, there's not very many. Same thing here when we move from when Web3 and all these decentralized technologies are integrated in with traditional websites, it's going to feel like a completely different experience. But at the same time, it's still going to be the same internet, just updated to be able to have more functionality for the modern day. And yeah, so I definitely think it's more like a growth, like growing together evolution type thing. It's not going to be one replacing the others. And then specific to domain names, I believe that eventually these domain name holders from the traditional domain industry are going to look to adopting blockchain technology for their backends on their domain names. But they're going to be much slower at doing it, and they probably won't have as much of the functionality as the newer domain name systems. But I think that like eventually they're going to start upgrading to the standard. And what's going to happen is all these Web3 applications and companies are going to force them to like make an update, because you'll be able to do cooler things in a .crypto or a .zil domain than a .com. And if that's the case, then like for competitive reasons, they're going to eventually try to catch up.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. Well, this is a really good rundown of blockchain domains. Hopefully this helped the listeners have a much better understanding of what blockchain domains are. If you're listening and you still have more questions for us, make sure you get in touch with us, tweet us at Unstoppable Web, and let us know what your questions are, and we'll get those answered for you on a future episode. Thanks, Matt. This was great. Great chatting with you as always. Thanks, listeners, for tuning in, and we'll be back again soon with another episode of the Unstoppable Podcast.